Ever since I've seen episode 5 of season 3 in Rick and Morty, and I've been thinking about how technology impacts our lives and our core beliefs as humans. The episode is called The Whirly Dirly Conspiracy, and this was the exact scene that got me thinking about all of this.
But yes, it is super fancy. I mean, my job here is to make Morty happy. I'm not gonna take you somewhere dangerous.
Rick Sanchez, I told you if I ever saw your face in here again, I would stick you like the pig you are.
Snoopy bloopers. I told you if you tried, there'd be 2 funerals.
Someone? Someone? My friend, it has been...
You can see in that scene that Rick is taking Jerry to a super advanced resort where they've come up with a technology called the immortality field. And that immortality field allows people in the episode to basically ignore all the consequences of death, because as soon as you die, you get revived instantly. We can see that the characters in the episode are ignoring death and all its dangers. For example, by greeting each other, by killing each other, joking around, by stabbing each other, creating rides in that resort that literally do kill the passengers, or even just eating exotic poisonous food or drinks that do kill the people drinking it. All because technology for them has fixed the issue of death. And so even if something can lead to death, but it might taste good or it might be thrilling, people in the episode in the immortality field don't mind participating in it because they've eliminated the consequences of death. Now, at the start, this was a very fun and cool episode, and it got me excited that at some point in the future we can create something that changes our core belief or something so unique and so hard as death. But then I started thinking about ways that technology has already done that to our community or to society in general. And I started looking at how technology has affected religion, has affected education, has affected our views on war and media in general. And the one that really stood out for me, or the most interesting one, or the most interesting example of how technology has affected our views on things, is how technology affected our views on sexuality. Something so unique to humans, so private, and also a bit of a big deal. And so I want you to imagine yourself maybe when your grandparents were still in high school, or maybe a much longer period than that. And I want you to consider yourself about to have some sexual activities or sexual intercourse with another person. There is probably 4 main consequences that can happen by actually doing that. And these are birth, you could end up having pregnancy, permanent illness or diseases such as STDs, permanent changes to the body, especially the female body, and finally risk of pregnancy going wrong, or babies not being delivered in a safe environment or in a safe way. And there's obviously much more consequences that can happen as well. But these are the main consequences that can happen when you participate in sexual activities, especially so far away. Now, what does this have to do with technology? Well, if you have a look at those 4 consequences now, and think about it, you can tell that sexual activities were something scary or is something that can really cause a lot of changes in your life. But if we break down those 4 consequences, starting with birth, and how there is now many contraception ways that can actually prevent birth from happening to begin with, we get examples like condoms, we have things like IUDs, we have things like implants, and there's so many other options that can stop fertilization to the egg to even happen from the first place. And so we now eliminated the first consequence that can happen, which is unplanned or unwanted sex. And even if none of that actually works, you still have the option to safely and in a healthy way have the morning after pill where you can actually get rid of the pregnancy, or you can even seek other options like abortion that can happen now in a clinic in a safe way for the mother. For the second consequence, which is permanent illness, diseases, or STDs, a lot of them are now curable as well. And they're either curable, preventable, or at least in a worst case, you can also manage it by medication. There are, however, some illnesses and STDs that cannot be curable and are not manageable. So now, to some extent, we also managed to get rid of the second consequence. The third one, and that is permanent changes to the female body. We now have surgeries like the hymen repair surgeries, which actually sort of give the physical impression of virginity, or that nothing has actually ever been done there. And you can find more details on that on your own. Finally, and this tackles the last and final consequence that we're going to talk about for sexual activities, and that is the risk of pregnancy going wrong or babies not being delivered properly or in a healthy environment. You can now predict or calculate a better word, when exactly delivery is due. Pregnancy tests are also even more accurate, so you can now very early on get a good understanding on when you're due for delivery or whether you're pregnant or not, and be able to act accordingly. If you want to, you do have the choice of which hospital to go to, which doctors to operate on, how and when the delivery actually happens. And so that option or that consequence is also now eliminated entirely. All these consequences that really controlled our view, or helped at least have a perspective on sexual activities and sexual intercourse, have been eliminated by advances in technology. Now let's circle back for a second. If our view of sexuality was so dramatic because of the consequences that it can lead to, then surely with the possibilities that technology offers in today's society, our view on sexuality has also been altered or been reduced from that earlier dramatic perspective that we had, because none of these consequences are as prominent or at least as aggressive as they used to before. Now, talking about sexuality is cool and everything, and I think that these few examples make it very clear on how technology impacts our beliefs on sexual activities, but I think there's two more examples that I would like to talk about in this video, and that is the effects of technology on religion and the effects of technology on immigration. And I'll start with immigration because it's something more personal to me. It's something that I'm more confident talking about. Now, in 2014, my family and I moved from Egypt to Australia, so basically the furthest country away from Egypt, and compare that to when my auntie or when someone else immigrates, and we can see that in movies and in media. When a family member in a movie is traveling so far away, you can see that there's a huge difference between how immigration is perceived at that time and how it is perceived now. And I think, again, that is something that is caused by technology. 20 or 15 or even just 30 years ago, when someone would travel a huge distance from a country to another country, let's say from Egypt to Australia, the methods of communication were not the same as now. Someone immigrating means that you might spend days, weeks, or even months not actually communicating with that person. And even when communication was to happen, it could be a one phone call where you have to gather the entire family to communicate with that person because communication is expensive, or the line at that time was expensive. And so you'd get very limited time. Everyone needs to be available at that same time in order to communicate with that person. And most likely you will actually not end up seeing those people for a really long time. To give you some perspective, when my auntie left Egypt, she spent the first 10 years not coming to Egypt, or I think it was even more, maybe 15 years not coming to Egypt and visiting us. When we, however, in 2014 came to Australia, we would go to Egypt every 2 years. That's because flights were now cheaper than before, and it was also safer, it was cleaner, more amenities available on flights, and so traveling itself was more comfortable because of technology. But aside from actually physically visiting another country or your original country, now, even though I'm in Australia, I'm so in touch with my cousins in Egypt. I get to send them snaps every day, probably more than the people that I communicate with here in Australia. We can video call whenever we want. If we have an update, whether it's important, silly, or just some gossip, really, we can communicate instantly just by a phone call or even a video call, where I get to see the physical changes that person is going in an engagement, a wedding, or a graduation. I can sort of be there, not obviously the same way, but I'm still in touch with everyone. And so the process of actually immigrating to a different place is now much easier when it comes to that. But something else that technology has made it easier is actually being able to have a sense on what that country is that you're going to before you actually get there. By watching movies, listening to the music of that country, even just looking at Instagram or Facebook and seeing what that country is like, you can have a decent idea at least on what goes on from day to day. You can even watch the news now of a different country or in a different, entirely different content, and understand how the weather is like, what the traffic is like, and so on. And so it suddenly doesn't seem like you're jumping to a whole new world. Instead, you're going to a place far away, but you can still be in touch with all your family and friends in your original country, and you're also not having that huge of a leap when it comes to immigration. The third thing, which is how technology impacts our view on religion or religion in general, is a bit of a touchy topic. So I'll talk about dead religions or religions that have passed away. And with that, I'm going to speak about the Greek and the Roman gods at that time. Now, if you have a look at most of the gods from the Greek area, the Roman area, and even the Egyptian area, we can see that there was always gods that would represent natural phenomena. Things like the god of the sun, the god of the moon, the god of the night, the god of thunder. These are all gods that people believed at that time. And if we can make a chart on technology and the belief in those gods, we can straight away start seeing a pattern of gods dropping, or the belief in gods dropping, or in religion dropping, as technology also increases. Things like the god of thunder, as people started actually understanding how thunder's formed, how it's created, but not just that, even being able to predict when a thunder's about to hit and how strong it's going to hit and where it's going to hit, the belief in a god that creates that thunder has all of a sudden become redundant. Same thing for the sun. We can now track when the sun's going to come, exactly what time, to the minute really, how long it takes for light from the sun to arrive at us, the temperature of the sun. And so all of a sudden, technology has changed our view on the sun and thunder and all these natural phenomena that were not explained before, to things that not just can we explain them, but we can harness them. We can use and generate electricity from the sun. So we've got control over those things right now, and all of a sudden we don't believe that there is a god of the sun or thunder, etc. I think this also will apply to a lot of the current religions, or our views in general. As technology increases, it seems like a lot of our core beliefs and a lot of our core understanding of things starts to change as well. Some of these can be to the negatives, but a lot of it seems to be to the positives as well. Anyways, that was it for this episode. I hope you did enjoy it. I hope you found this different topic unique and nice. If you have any feedback, please make sure you leave it in the comments or email me directly, or just like the video or dislike it. That would be more than enough. Thank you, and I hope to see you in the next episode.